The prehistory of Egypt spans the period from the earliest human settlement to the beginning of the early dynastic period around 3100 BC. Starting with the first pharaoh, Narmer for some Egyptologists, Horaha for others, with the name Menes also possibly used for one of these kings. This presynaptic era is traditionally equivalent to the final part of the Neolithic period beginning 6000 BC and ending in the Naqada Third period 3000 BC. The dates of the pre-dynastic period were first defined before widespread archaeological excavation of Egypt took place, and recent finds indicating very gradual pre-dynastic development have led to controversy over when exactly the pre-dynastic period ended. Thus, various terms such as proto-dynastic period, Zero Dynasty or Dynasty Zero are used to name the part of the period which might be characterized as pre-dynastic by some and early dynastic by others. The pre-dynastic period is generally divided into cultural eras, each named after the place where a certain type of Egyptian settlement was first discovered. However, the same gradual development that characterizes the proto-dynastic period is present throughout the entire pre-dynastic period, and individual cultures must not be interpreted as separate entities but as largely subjective divisions used to facilitate study of the entire period. The vast majority of pre-dynastic archaeological finds have been in Upper Egypt, because the silt of the Nile River was more heavily deposited at the Delta region, completely burying most delta sites long before modern times. Excavation of the Nile has exposed early stone tools from the last million or so years. The earliest of these lithic industries were located within a 30-meter terrace, and were primitive Acheulean, Abavilian, Chellean, 600,000 years ago, and an Egyptian form of the Clactonian, 400,000 years ago. Within the 15-meter terrace was developed Acheulean, originally reported as early Mousterian, 160,000 years ago, but since changed to Levalloisian. Other implements were located in the 10-meter terrace. The 4.5 and 3-meter terraces saw a more developed version of the Levalloisian, also initially reported as an Egyptian version of Mousterian. An Egyptian version of the Aterian technology was also located. Some of the oldest known structures were discovered in Egypt by archaeologist Waldemar Chmielewski along the southern border near Wadi Halfa, Sudan in Arkan 8 site. Chmielewski dated the structures to 100,000 BC. The remains of the structures are oval depressions about 30 centimeters deep and 2 times 1 meters across. Many are lined with flat sandstone slabs. They are called tent rings, because the rocks supported a dome-like shelter of skins or brush. This type of dwelling provided a place to live, but if necessary, could be taken down easily and moved. They were mobile structures easily disassembled, moved, and reassembled, providing hunter-gatherers with semi-permanent habitation. The Kermusan industry in Egypt began between 42,000 and 32,000 B. Kermusans developed tools not only from stone but also from animal bones and hematite. They also developed small arrowheads resembling those of Native Americans, but no bows have been found. The end of the Kermusan industry came around 16,000 BC, with the appearance of other cultures in the region, including the Gamaean. The late Paleolithic in Egypt started around 30,000 BC. The Nazalt Kater skeleton was found in 1980 and given an age of 33,000 years in 1982, based on 9 samples ranging between 35,100 and 30,360 years old. This specimen is the only complete modern human skeleton from the earliest Late Stone Age in Africa. The Hafan and Comedian, 2 closely related industries, flourished along the Upper Nile Valley. Hafan sites are found in the far north of Sudan, whereas Comedian sites are found in Upper Egypt. For the Hafan, only 4 radiocarbon dates have been produced. Schild and Vendorf discard the earliest and latest as erratic and conclude that the Hafen existed 22.5 to 22.0 kcal BP. People survived on a diet of large herd animals in the Kermusan tradition of fishing. Greater concentrations of artifacts indicate that they were not bound to seasonal wandering, but settled for longer periods. The Hafen culture was derived in turn from the Kermusan, which depended on specialized hunting, fishing, and collecting techniques for survival. The primary material remains of this culture are stone tools, flakes, and a multitude of rock paintings. In Egypt, analyses of pollen found at archaeological sites indicate that the people of the Sabellian culture, also known as the Esna culture, were gathering wheat and barley. The Sabellian culture began around 13,000 BC and vanished around 10,000 BC. Domesticated seeds were not found. Modern wheat and barley originated in Asia Minor and Canaan. It has been hypothesized that the sedentary lifestyle used by farmers led to increased warfare, which was detrimental to farming and brought this period to an end. The cotton culture 13,000–9,000 BC was a Mesolithic industry that, archaeological evidence suggests, originated in Upper Egypt, present-day South Egypt. Approximately 15,000 years ago, the cotton subsistence mode is estimated to have persisted for approximately 4,000 years. It was characterized by hunting, as well as a unique approach to food gathering that incorporated the preparation and consumption of wild grasses and grains. Systematic efforts were made by the cotton people to water, care for, and harvest local plant life. But grains were not planted in ordered rows. Around 20 archaeological sites in Upper Nubia give evidence for the existence of the cotton culture's grain grinding culture. Its makers also practiced wild grain harvesting along the Nile during the beginning of the Sahaba Nile phase, when desiccation in the Sahara caused residents of the Libyan oases to retreat into the Nile Valley. Among the cotton culture sites is the Jebel Sahaba cemetery, which has been dated to the Mesolithic. Cotton peoples were the first to develop sickles, and they also developed grinding stones independently to aid in the collecting and processing of these plant foods prior to consumption. However, there are no indications of the use of these tools after around 10,000 BC, when hunter-gatherers replaced them. The Harifians, 8,800 BCE–8,000 BCE, are viewed as migrating out of the Fayyum and the eastern deserts of Egypt, including Sinai, during the late Mesolithic to merge with the pre-pottery Neolithic B culture, whose tool assemblage resembles that of the Harifian. This assimilation led to the Circum-Arabian nomadic pastoral complex, a group of cultures that invented nomadic pastoralism, and may have been the original culture which spread Proto-Semitic languages throughout Mesopotamia. Continued expansion of the desert forced the early ancestors of the Egyptians to settle around the Nile more permanently and adopt a more sedentary lifestyle during the Neolithic. The period from 9000 to 6000 BC has left very little in the way of archaeological evidence. Around 6000 BC, Neolithic settlements appear all over Egypt. Studies based on morphological, genetic, and archaeological data have attributed these settlements to migrants from the Fertile Crescent in the Near East returning during the Egyptian and North African Neolithic, bringing agriculture to the region. Jared Diamond, in a non-scholarly work, proposes other regions in Africa independently developed agriculture at about the same time: the Ethiopian highlands, the Sahel, and West Africa. Some morphological and post-cranial data has linked the earliest farming populations at Fayum, Merimd, and El Badari to Near Eastern populations. However, the archaeological data also suggests that Near Eastern domesticates were incorporated into a pre-existing foraging strategy and only slowly developed into a full-blown lifestyle, contrary to what would be expected from settler colonists from the Near East. Finally, the names for the Near Eastern domesticates imported into Egypt were not Sumerian or Proto-Semitic loan words, which further diminishes the likelihood of a mass immigrant colonization of Lower Egypt during the transition to agriculture. Weaving is evidenced for the first time during the Phaeum period. People of this period, unlike later Egyptians, buried their dead very close to, and sometimes inside, their settlements. Although archaeological sites reveal very little about this time, an examination of the many Egyptian words for city provides a hypothetical list of causes of Egyptian sedentarism. In Upper Egypt, terminology indicates trade, protection of livestock, high ground for flood refuge, and sacred sites for deities. From about 5000 to 4200 BC, the Merimde culture, so far only known from a large settlement site at the edge of the western delta, flourished in Lower Egypt. The culture has strong connections to the Phaeum culture as well as the Levant. People lived in small huts, produced a simple undecorated pottery and had stone tools. Cattle, sheep, goats, and pigs were held. Wheat, sorghum, and barley were planted. The Merimde people buried their dead within the settlement and produced clay figurines. The first life-sized Egyptian head made of clay comes from Merimde. The El Omari culture is known from a small settlement near modern Cairo. People seem to have lived in huts, but only post holes and pits survive. The pottery is undecorated. Stone tools include small flakes, axes and sickles. Metal was not yet known. Their sites were occupied from 4000 BC to the Archaic period. The Maadi culture, also called Buto-Maadi culture, is the most important Lower Egyptian prehistoric culture contemporary with Naqada I and II phases in Upper Egypt. The culture is best known from the site Maadi near Cairo, but is also attested in many other places in the delta to the Fayum region. This culture was marked by development in architecture and technology. It also followed its predecessor cultures when it comes to undecorated ceramics. Copper was known, and some copper adzes have been found. The pottery is simple and undecorated and shows, in some forms, strong connections to the southern Levant. People lived in small huts, partly dug into the ground. The dead were buried in cemeteries, but with few burial goods. The Maadi culture was replaced by the Naqada III culture. Whether this happened by conquest or infiltration is still an open question. Nabta Playa was once a large internally drained basin in the Nubian desert, located approximately 800 kilometers south of modern-day Cairo or about 100 kilometers west of Abu Simbel in southern Egypt, 22.51 degrees north, 30.73 degrees east. Today the region is characterized by numerous archaeological sites. The Nabta Playa archaeological site, one of the earliest of the Egyptian Neolithic period, is dated to circa 7500 BC. The Tajan culture was the next in Upper Egypt. This culture group is named for the burials found at Dur Tassa, on the east bank of the Nile between Asiut and Akamim. The Tajan culture group is notable for producing the earliest blacktop ware, a type of red and brown pottery that is colored black on the top portion and interior. This pottery is vital to the dating of pre-dynastic Egypt. Because all dates for the pre-dynastic period are tenuous at best, WMF Petrie developed a system called sequence dating by which the relative date, if not the absolute date, of any given pre-dynastic site can be ascertained by examining its pottery. As the pre-dynastic period progressed, the handles on pottery evolved from functional to ornamental. The degree to which any given archaeological site has functional or ornamental pottery can also be used to determine the relative date of the site. Since there is little difference between Tajan ceramics and Badurian pottery, the Tajan culture overlaps the Badurian range significantly. From the Tajan period onward, it appears that Upper Egypt was influenced strongly by the culture of Lower Egypt. The Badurian culture, from about 4400 to 4000 BC, is named for the battery site near Durtasa. It followed the Thasian culture, but was so similar that many consider them one continuous period. The Badarayan culture continued to produce the kind of pottery called blacktop ware, albeit much improved in quality, and was assigned sequence dating numbers 21-29. The primary difference that prevents scholars from merging the two periods is that Badarayan sites use copper in addition to stone and are thus Chalcolithic settlements, while the Neolithic Thasian sites are still considered Stone Age. Badarayan flint tools continued to develop into sharper and more shapely blades, and the first faience was developed. Distinctly Badarayan sites have been located from Nekon to a little north of Abydos. It appears that the Fayumay culture and the Badarayan and Thasian periods overlap significantly. However, the Fayumay culture was considerably less agricultural and was still Neolithic in nature.